Good morning, hello, and welcome to today's program, Cybersecurity Basics for Remote Work. This webinar is being presented by Connor Swam, founder and CEO of Fin Security, experts at security awareness and phishing protection education. Connor's firm helps small and large businesses understand where their cyber vulnerabilities are and how to fix them. Thank you, Connor, for sharing your experience on this important topic today. And I trust all of our viewers will find it informative and helpful. My name is Maria Smith, and I am a volunteer with SCORE of Chester and Delaware counties. SCORE is a nonprofit organization that has been in existence for over 50 years and is a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. SCORE's mission is to foster a strong small business community by providing free mentorship and business education. We are here to support you and help you grow your business. Here in Chester and Delaware counties, we have 100 volunteers ready to help. Our mentoring and most of our educational programs are free. You will find many tools, templates, and other business resources on our website resource library, and that link will be provided to you after today's session. Today, the program is 1 hour, scheduled till 11 o'clock. The presentation is being recorded and will be made available to you after today's session. You all have been placed on mute, so we avoid distractions. Please ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we will take breaks to answer them throughout the program.
So as Maria said, well, first, thank you all for joining. But as Maria said, today we're going to be talking about some cybersecurity basics, staying secure while working remotely. So a few things before I get started. There are times in this presentation that I have where I'll stop for questions. So if you have any questions, please throw them in, as Maria said, the Q&A, or put them in the chat, or whatever you need to do. I find that every time I do a presentation like this, the most valuable time is when I'm answering the questions that you have specifically about yourself or your business or anything that applies to you specifically. There is no stupid question. There's no question above being answered. So please put that in the chat and I'd be happy to get to it. So this presentation today, this is aimed at teaching you basically, if you, we'll go through 6 things you can do today, and actually I'll throw some of them right here, that if you end up doing these 6 things or any of these 6 things, you'll end up being just a little bit more secure. So this is actually something that you can take with you moving forward today. I mean, you'll have the recording of this, you'll have the slides for this, so you could follow this after the fact. And if you do any of these, you'll just be a little bit more secure. The whole reason I actually do this presentation is with COVID and with changing workforces and all that stuff, and people working from home or just working remotely in general, it could be from anywhere, not even from your home. There's just a few additional cybersecurity risks that people are unknowingly exposed to sometimes. And so I wanted to essentially create this educational program to teach people, okay, what's a little different, what might you not expect to be an issue while working from home, because you're typically used to working in an office. So today we'll end up going through password protecting your Wi-Fi, enabling multi-factor authentication. I'll explain not only what that is, but how you can use it, updating software, using what's called a virtual private network. I'll get into that as well. Staying alert for SMS and voice phishing. And then number 6, arguably the most popular form of phishing, is email phishing. People emailing you, asking for things, you know, asking for money, asking for access, asking for information. So we'll go over how to recognize that's going on and prevent it from turning into a potential issue. So first step, or first thing we'll talk about is password protecting your Wi-Fi. So why does it matter if you have a password on your Wi-Fi is always where I start. I think it's super important, especially for a topic such as cybersecurity to start with. So we're asking you to do this thing. Why is it important? So let's start there. Well, if you have a password unprotected, so an unprotected Wi-Fi, it'll allow anyone who can see your network to connect to your network. So if you think of people driving by your house or near your business who could see that you have an open Wi-Fi connection, they would be able to connect and then get on your network. The second thing is Now that they're on your network, one thing to recognize is that home networks or home office networks or wherever you have your business, they're often more trusted. So often there's this thing called discoverability, where in order to make things really, really convenient, you'll end up allowing other devices, so everything you connect, your printers, your laptops, your phones, to see all the other devices that are connected to that network. So if somebody else can gain access to your home network, i.e. it's not protected via a password, they can log on, get your Wi-Fi, and then find all of those devices there. So they can see what kind of devices you have, what kind of printers you have. And it's just information that nobody but yourself should end up having access to. So it's just one more step to just be a little bit more secure, is to make sure people don't know what devices are connected to your network. So now that, that's why we should be password protecting our Wi-Fi. How can you do this? Well, if you're currently near your router, you could actually go check this out right now. But on the back of your router, there will be instructions. So if you look at the back, if you pick it up, look at the back of your wireless router, it'll have a password. It'll have like basically an admin password and an admin username that you can use to actually log in to your router. So what that means is basically you would visit a really specific web address, like youtube.com is a web address, but this would be a very specific web address on the back of your router. You would have a password, a username, and then with that information, you can actually log into your router and start configuring it. So basically, when you do that, you would be able to set up multiple Wi-Fi connections. What I mean by that is some people have what's called a 5G or a 2.4G connection on their router, depending upon what kind of router you have. That's an example of a multiple Wi-Fi connections if you have both of those. So what I'm suggesting is you can actually go set up a Wi-Fi connection there, or you can opt to password protect your existing Wi-Fi connections there. It's usually super easy. Usually just click a button and then create a password, and then you'll have to go through all the rigmarole of telling your family members all of your family members the password, which is sometimes the harder part. So usually it's just on the back, like I said, on the back of your router, it'll walk you through step-by-step instructions how to do that. And then this last point that I make is, if possible, don't allow network discovery. So what I mean by that is when you connect a new printer, a new laptop, a new desktop, it'll say, hey, would you like other devices on this Wi-Fi network to be able to see or discover you? I forget the exact terminology. If possible, just don't allow that. Now, I know it can be super convenient sometimes to let that happen, in terms of not having printer issues ever again, because you can always just select it from your local network. But if possible, just don't allow it. It's just another step that you could take to be a tiny bit more secure. So now that I'm asking you to create a password, let's actually go through how you can create a strong one. So if you look at this chart here on the left-hand side of my screen, this is the time it would take for a modern computer to randomly guess your password. So basically, if I had a password that was 9 digits long and consisted of only numbers, modern computers can guess that instantaneously. So basically, modern computers can guess so many different random combinations of 9 numbers that it would break your password instantly. It'd be able to what's called brute force it. So what we're looking to do is to create a complex password that would take a very long time for a computer to actually guess. So you can see, as we kind of increase the length, but also increase the different types of things that are in our password. So lowercase letters and uppercase letters and now numbers as well thrown into that, and symbols. As you can see, it takes a little longer now for a modern computer to guess that. So if we had a password that was 12 digits long and consisted of numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, it would end up taking 34,000 years for a modern computer to end up randomly guessing. So that's kind of how powerful adding a little bit more complexity to your password ends up being. So now I have some examples over here and the time it would take for a computer to crack them. Do not use any example over here as your actual password. These are very insecure passwords. It's just easy for me to demonstrate what, an example of using all these different types of things would be. So for instance, 45678 cracked instantaneously, password 1 cracked in less than 2 minutes. But now if I have password with capital letters and a 0 and an exclamation point, and I think this is like 16 or 17 digits long, it would take 2 million years for a modern computer to crack that. So it ends up just making it a little bit more secure. But again, don't use password 2021. So arguably, the most effective thing you could do to create a little bit more security is that every account you have, so every piece of software you're using, every, even Facebook or your email or YouTube or Gmail or anything like that, they'll allow you to set up what's called two-factor authentication. So two-factor authentication is a form of multi-factor authentication. What I mean by that is multi-factor authentication might have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different steps that it takes to get access, whereas two-factor authentication requires exactly 2. So what you see here on our screen is actually an example of two-factor authentication, where step 1, you're going to log in with your password and your username. So that's the first form of identification, right? You have the password, you have the username. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be some second form of verification. And I put 3 really popular forms right here. One is your fingerprint. One is just a simple text message with a code. And one is a code that is generated by a key fob or something that you might get from your bank. And now it is the proper password and proper username combined with a valid second form of verification. Those combined now give you access. So this is way, way, way more secure than just having a password and a username, because even if a malicious individual is able to guess your password, if they don't have your cell phone, or if they don't have your fingerprint, or if they don't have that authenticator, that second form of verification, they frankly just won't be able to get in. And so if you set that up on all of your accounts, and even if your password gets cracked, you'll know that somebody was able to get your password, but they won't be able to get in. So it'll give you the opportunity to reset your password before anything else could potentially become an issue. It just ends up making things way more secure. There we go. And then so now I'll actually get into what are the types of multi-factor authentication that you could use. So I already mentioned fingerprint. And so I'll go through some of the pros and the cons. One, you can't lose access. So, with my phone right here, getting access to my phone is as easy as just putting my fingerprint on top of it. And it's very quick. It's oftentimes the most convenient form of multi-factor authentication. Second, right here, we have in the middle is a key fob. So what I mean by that is usually this works with banks, maybe some other way more secure institutions. They'll give you a little thing that you could put on your keychain with a button. And when you press the button, it'll have a 6-digit code that you put in. This is basically unhackable. It's not connected to the internet or anything like that. It's just literally a little piece of technology that attaches to your keychain. However, you can lose it. So, if you thought you put this in your sock drawer or something like that, to make sure it doesn't get lost, and then you can't find it, sometimes it's hard to undo that. You'd have to, physically drive to the bank to undo that and maybe bring some identification with you. So sometimes it's hard if you lose access to that. The most common form of multi-factor authentication, and the one that I use and the one that I recommend everyone use, is called an authenticator app. So literally on my cell phone, I have actually this one on the right here, Google Authenticator, where I just have a way for me that I'll log into my phone. So actually, maybe this is 3 forms of authentication. I'll get into my phone, I'll open that application, and I'll just look for the very specific application I'm trying to get into. So Google or YouTube or Facebook or anything like that. And then I'll put in the 6-digit code that my app tells me is for that specific application. So this is Google Authenticator, and this one on the left here is called Authy. That's AUTHY, if you wanted to look that up. Either is fine. I personally use Google Authenticator. And the last, and maybe the most popular, is just getting a text message. So when you set up an account, most accounts will actually require you to do multi-factor authentication these days. And then sometimes the easiest way for people to set it up is just get a text message or a phone call. And so they'll set that up. It's oftentimes not as quick though. And there's sometimes some security concerns with that, but for the most part, an SMS is okay. So I'll pause here for questions. Oftentimes these that I've written down here are some of the most helpful kinds of questions that people ask. How would this work specifically in my business? What should I do if blank happens? What would you recommend for, X, Y, or Z? What do you think I should do in this situation? Where do I start? What is the cost, whether that's time or money, to do anything? How can I learn about blank? And is there anything I am missing? So again, we'll have one more time to stop later on in the presentation to answer questions. But any questions like these are typically the most helpful for everyone here, everyone watching. And then if you're watching this after the fact, you could always send these to my email, which will be provided at the end.
Hi, Connor, it's Maria. We don't have any questions in the box, but I actually have a question for you about those examples you just suggested, the authentication examples. Sure. Are they free of charge to users?
Let me go back.
Like the
yes.
apps and so on? Mm-hmm.
I know that Google Authenticator is. I believe Authy is as well. And then there's a paid tier for some like additional services you can get from them. But I just use the Google one that's on the right. And yes, that is absolutely free.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
And as people have questions, don't be shy. Please enter them into the Q&A box. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. I'll pause here for like one more minute or so in case somebody's writing some questions. Oftentimes I get a lot of questions about antivirus software like Norton, Avast, things like that. If you have any questions. We
did get one question that's not in the box. Someone texted me, how often should you change your passwords?
So it's like, I have a real good answer for this. It's like, how often should you change the oil in your car? I asked my mechanic that one time. And the mechanic said, ideally, if you like in an ideal world, the oil would run into the top of your engine and out the bottom. Like that's how quickly it would end up being changed. However, let's be realistic, right? That's why people say 5,000 miles or whatever. So I would say the typical recommendation is no more than every 90 days. So, 90-day rotation. Some businesses, depending upon, the sensitivity of the work they do, or if it's for the government or some other regulations, they'll do every 30 days or every 60 days. However, I would say, every 90 days is very safe. Personally, and I'll get into this a little later on into the presentation. I personally use a password manager to create really secure passwords. I personally enable MFA, so multi-factor authentication, everywhere. So I'm not as keen on rotating my passwords, but usually I'm not in a position where I'd need to be doing that.
Okay, very good advice. Thank you.
Yep. Did that person text it to you because they're unable to add questions to the Q&A?
No, it's one of our SCORE associates. That's why there was a text.
Okay. So, again, if you have questions, don't be afraid to throw them in the chat, even though we're not at that specific point. So updating your software. So I'll explain software like this. Sometimes, software, cybersecurity, and computers can be like a black box. It's hard to understand. It's hard to peer in and get any kind of information that you can use. So I'll explain it like this. There are two types of software that you should largely be aware of. One, your operating system, and two, just application software. So just applications is what they're called. So your operating system is like the foundation of your home, and you already know what all these different operating systems are. That is Windows. Windows is an operating system. That is Apple OS. If you're using a MacBook, what your computer is running on, the base layer is Apple OS or Mac OS. And so those are two different types of operating systems. There's a few others, but those are the most popular, those two right there. And then applications would be things like what we're on right now, Zoom or Google Chrome, or if you're like Adobe Acrobat, a PDF editor, or any kind of other software, or video editing software, that would be like an application. So I explain it like this. If you have a security vulnerability in your operating system, that's like having a crack in your foundation, right? It's a big problem. It's something that needs to be taken care of immediately. And then if you have a security vulnerability in an application that you're using, it's like leaving a window open or a door open or a door unlocked or anything like that. So it's still not something that you want to be doing, and you should definitely prevent that, stop that and fix it. But it's not as necessarily serious as an operating system vulnerability. So it's really simple to make sure that you don't have any cracks in your foundation, no doors are unlocked. It's just keep everything up to date. So the three things you can really, the one thing you need to do is just not ignore software updates from your operating system. So if you get a little notification that says, hey, we have a security update or an update for you, you should probably go install that. And then this is how you can do that. So if you're on Windows, right here on the left, click the start button, go to settings, go to update and security, and then click the Windows update button. If you're up to date, you'll get something like this. If you really don't want to do it, you can even schedule it for some time that would be convenient, like 2 or 3 in the morning when you're going to be asleep. And this is the screen you'd get if everything's good to go and you are completely up to date. For Mac OS, click the Apple menu, click software update, and then if available, you'll see a screen like this called update now. So now this is again updating your operating systems. Your applications that you're using will typically either, if you haven't enabled automatic update, they'll let you know that you should update them. And then again, just don't ignore that. When companies release updates to their operating systems, but also to their applications, it's for one of two reasons largely. One is they have new features, so they have new stuff that you could really take advantage of that you might like. But the second, and the most important in my mind, are security updates. There are thousands and thousands of security researchers across the world that are constantly looking for vulnerabilities in the software that you're using. And when they find them, they let the the author, the owner of the software know. That owner would then make changes, patch that vulnerability, and then send you the update. So anytime there's an update, there's a good chance there's a little bit of either there's some security patches that'll end up being in that for y'all to take advantage of and continue to be secure. Now I will say this. For Windows specifically, I'm not aware of any, it's called end of lifing, where if your laptop's of a certain age or your computers of a certain age, you can't get access to the next software, which would slowly make your computer more vulnerable. I'm not aware of any of that. However, it's always good process, good procedure to just have newer laptops and computers. For specifically Macs, Apple computers, it's like 6 years, I think, is the limit. So after about 6 years, you physically will be unable to get updates to the operating system that you're using if your Apple device is more than 6 years old. So in that case, what I would recommend is buy a new laptop or a new desktop or whatever it ends up being, just to stay, up to date. Really important to stay up to date with that software. And then one of the newer things that I've added to this presentation is consider using a VPN. So I'll give you all the information you need to use a VPN. I'll give you some places you can go to take a look at which VPN would be right for you. But basically, what a VPN is called a virtual private network. And the easiest way to think about this is it's a way to browse the internet anonymously. So imagine basically if your computer is yourself, like you are your computer and you are standing out front of your house and you are yelling across the street to your neighbor asking for information. That is like you, that is like your computer yelling at the internet or telling the internet, I need this information, please give it to me. Well, anyone who is, within earshot of your request, of what you're asking your neighbor for, is going to be able to hear what you're asking and be able to know a little bit about you. They know where you are physically, they know what information you're asking for, and they'll have that information. So using a VPN would just prevent anyone from being able to hear that. It would be like if instead of yelling out of your front door so anyone could hear, if you called your neighbor and only you and your neighbor had access to that information. So it's kind of a way to do VPNs. And then I have a little infographic that I made right here. Simply put, a VPN encrypts your internet traffic and disguises your online identity. And this makes it more difficult for anyone else to track you online and to steal your data, basically what you're getting access to. Now, so this is like, this green arrow is your request to the internet. So you're on your computer, you would make a request to the internet. With a VPN though, you'll make a request to your VPN, and that VPN would make a request to the internet. And then the internet, or wherever you're getting this information from, would send the request back to your VPN, and then your VPN would send it back to you. So the only person or company that knows what your information you're accessing and how you're accessing it would be your VPN. And they make a really good habit of telling you exactly what they're doing with that data, or just flat out deleting it and not keeping track of it, because the anonymity is what you're using a VPN for. So if you didn't have a VPN here, you would just be making a request straight to wherever you need to go on the internet, and then it would be sending the response straight back to you. So if anyone were quote unquote listening in on that, they would be able to see what information you're accessing, and they'd be able to see where the internet is sending it back to, i.e. where they're sending it to, which is you. So I won't make any direct recommendations for a VPN. I personally use a VPN. What I would do is, here are 3 links that are going through 3 somewhat reputable organizations that have reviewed VPNs. I will tell you, mostly they're the same. Some VPNs have some other different security features. Some VPNs are free. Some virtual private networks have different stuff that you can take advantage of. The one that I personally use, I chose it because I could put it on my phone, my laptop, my desktop, everything would work together. It would, tie into my authenticator really easily. So enabling it and disabling it is not a problem at all. It's really convenient. That's why I chose mine. However, what I would recommend you do is go to one or all of these links and see, what are the top 3. You've probably heard of all of them. It's like ExpressVPN, NordVPN, and Surfshark. I think those are like the top 3 most popular. Go take a look at these links if you want to use one. They're really easy to install on your computer or on your phone and then get working. So phishing. Phishing is right now one of the most prevalent forms of, phishing is really involved in most cyber attacks at this point. And basically what phishing is it's a form of social engineering. And social engineering is somebody impersonating somebody else, or basically tricking you into giving them information, access to certain things in your company, or just flat out sending them money or cash. So it's just a way for a malicious individual to trick you into doing something that you probably shouldn't be doing. And some statistics I have here, just so you can know the kind of the scale of the problem, is that 91% of successful data breaches start with a phishing email. Now, that statistic is heavily debated. I put it here because it might be somewhere close to 91%, might be somewhere below it, depending upon how you look at the data, but it's very prevalent. That's why I put it there. Only 11% of organizations train their employees to recognize these attacks. So basically, it's the thing that we can do to combat this is education, like we're doing right now. And then according to the FBI, really reputable source, phishing accounted for 12 billion in losses to US businesses in 2019. So it is a big problem, both monetarily or by any other measure. It's a big problem that we should all be aware of. and that we should all be doing our best to educate ourselves to fight against. Now, there are certain different types of phishing that we'll go over today. There is voicemail phishing, that phishing right there, SMS phishing, and then email phishing. And then I put social engineering there at the top because social engineering is kind of the umbrella term that phishing sits under. So let's go through how we would recognize phishing in an email. So if y'all have ever received malicious emails or any of these questions don't ring true, chances are you were getting phished or somebody was trying to get you phished. So the first question you should ask yourself is, are you expecting this email? Flat out, a lot of malicious individuals somehow get information on your business. So they'll send you emails out of the blue or at a certain time where you might be more vulnerable to just doing what the email says. So the first thing you should always ask yourself when you get an email is, are you expecting this? Second thing is it too good to be true? There are still people and individuals and companies who fall for, free gift cards or free money or free anything, really. So is this really too good to be true? There's never a free lunch. So you're paying for it somehow, and you should try to figure that out before you end up doing whatever the email says. Third, does the email domain match the sender? And I'll go through kind of exactly what that means after this, but it's a way to confirm that the person who's sending you this email is actually the person they are, that they're trying to be. It's not a fake person that is impersonating them. Four, when you hover over a link, where does it go? So one of the most common ways to phish a user is to send them some links that look like they're going one place, but in reality, they go to another. And at that new place, malicious things start to occur for that person who ended up clicking on them. And the fifth, can you confirm the authenticity of that email? Can you call the person that sent it to you? Can you text them? Can you walk down to their office? Can you see them in person? Can you do anything? Before you end up taking whatever that directed action in that email is, can you actually confirm that that person is who they say they are? Really, really, really simple stuff sometimes. So these are the 5 questions. Take a screenshot, do whatever. You'll also have this presentation after the fact. This may seem like a lot, but you get to a point where all these happen instantaneously. Basically, you do it enough that the warning signs start. Gut reaction kicks in, and the habit that you have of going through all of these immediately recognizes something that's wrong or something that's off, and it ends up becoming pretty much an unconscious process at some point. So let's go through how you can end up spotting these. So the first is domain impersonation. So your domain is really simple, like zoom.us. Zoom is that domain, or like you see down here, google.com or github.com or anything like that. And so domain impersonation would be somebody who registers or buys a very similar looking domain in order to fool you into believing that you are the real company. So like, here's an example down here of typo squatting. Instead of Google, it's Google with a U. Instead of Amazon with an A, it's Amazon with an O. It's an example of typo squatting, but basically it's impersonating this domain right here. So root domain impersonation, what's called root domain, is if instead of google.com, they do Google dash something, or they make it look a lot like Google, and they're attempting to impersonate the actual google.com. That's called root domain impersonation. Top domain impersonation would be here, the ending at the end, what comes after the dot is really important in a web address, right? Google.com is not the same as google.info. They're different websites completely. Now, Google, I'm almost certain owns both of them, but it is different websites completely. You have to be very aware of that. And so top domain impersonation is if somebody registers a different domain ending at the end of that. Really simple. Subdomain impersonation would be if they buy a completely different web address right here, but then put a real one in front of that, so that when you end up getting an email, you'll just see CEO at big company, and then you'll completely ignore that this is the real domain right here. So the 2 things that are most important in a domain that you need to look out for are what comes right before the ending, the thing directly before the dot, the last dot, and then what is the actual ending itself is at the ending of the company you're typically working with. That's the most important. And then typo squatting, we already kind of went over. It's just registering a domain that looks really similar, has a 0 instead of an O, has an L instead of an I, stuff like that. It's hard to catch. So that's why it's always important when you're looking at a link, you need to know exactly where it's going. You need to know that I'm going to the exact web address that I expect to be going. And then display name impersonation would be like impersonating somebody that you know. So for instance, if you worked with a person named Josiah Carberry, you almost always see this and be like, oh, that's just Josiah sending me some information. I'm good to go. But it turns out this was sent from a random email address, jjwhite003@gmail.com. I have no idea who that is. You might not either. So you always need to be aware of what's the exact email, it's the exact address of the person sending me these things, because that is the most important thing, not the name that they've told me they have. And then the third, malicious links and images. So here's kind of an example of a fake IRS scam. Links look realistic. The real destination is often hidden. So when you would hover over this get started link right here, instead of going to like irs.gov or something like that, it went to this random carybaptist.org.uk/inc/s random web address that you should definitely not be going to if this was real information from the IRS. And then avoiding SMS and voice phishing. So this is sometimes the hardest to dispel because you're often having a conversation with somebody like on the phone who calls you. But I'll give you 4 rules that you can use to make sure that you are safe. 1, don't give out your information. And I always use banks for this example. If a bank's calling you, they say there's some issue with your account, they should have all the information they need to verify who you are. They don't need you, in most cases, to provide anything to them. So that's the first, is they should know who you are. They should know why they're calling you. They don't need you to verify any of that, or they don't need your password. They don't need any information from you. Don't give it to them. 2, contact only through secure channels. So here's what I would actually recommend them with the safest way to do all of this. If there was a real security incident in your bank and they needed to help you reset your password or whatever, you should hang up the phone when they call you, go to your bank's website and call them back on the website, the phone number that is on their website there. You can guarantee that you're actually contacting your bank and you're actually going to get connected with somebody that can help you complete whatever you're asking them to do. Change your password, whatever, shut down a bank account, whatever you need to do. So what I always recommend is hang up the phone, call them back on the number that's on their websites. It's always the safest way to do it. 3rd is be suspicious. It always behooves you to be a little suspicious. If somebody's calling you asking for potentially sensitive information, should always, red flags should be raised, and you should always be suspicious of the individual doing that. 4, just refuse the request. So I say this every time. Your password is your password. If anyone is calling you, if your bank's calling you and saying, hey, we need your password to log in and do XYZ ABC, hang up the phone and then report that phone number, report that phone call to any governing authority, to your actual bank as well. So when you create a password, it is your bank doesn't know it. They don't store your password, rather they should not. And if they do, it's a big security vulnerability. But in 99% of cases, your bank's not going to store your password. Basically, that is something that is yours. It is not theirs. So if anyone's asking for your password, they are almost certainly not going to be with your bank. And you should, in all cases, you should never give anyone your password ever. It doesn't matter if they say that they're, with your bank and they're in the security department and they need it to do ABC. They should never need your password for anything ever. So don't give it to them. And then SMS and voice phishing. SMS phishing, often very little to no information. There's an appeal with urgency. Almost certainly it's, hey, your password, your Amazon package is not going to get delivered if you don't click here and do this thing. It's often things like that. It's often from an unknown sender, so always be wary of that. And there's very little to no information in the actual message itself. One thing you could look out for, again, is that domain impersonation we talked about. This is not Apple right here. This is id-apple.mobi, which is a random domain for all intents and purposes. So probably shouldn't go there because it's not going to get you to Apple. And then for voicemail phishing, never give out your login information. Again, I'll restate here. Your password is your password. Nobody needs your password but you. Your bank doesn't need it. Your cousin doesn't need it. The security department at any company you're using doesn't need it. It is your password. Do not give it to them. So that's what I would say there. Do you have a question, Maria?
No, I think you're going to pause for questions in a minute, right?
Yep, right here.
Okay. This is a very quiet group today.
Yeah.
You're not getting any questions in the box, but you did make me think of a couple. One, who do you report phishing to? Who are the authorities?
So the FBI has an online portal where you can actually report that from. So you can, send them the actual emails and you can submit them. And then usually any financial institution you work with will also have a reporting fraud hotline or a reporting fraud mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
And that, phishing and social engineering would be under that umbrella of fraud that you could report that to as well.
Mm-hmm. And sort of related to that is deleting the message, whether it's email or a text or what have you, is that sufficient to make you be safe? Or do you actually need to forward that to the authorities? What do you do with those things that show up?
Yeah, so just because somebody's targeting you, i.e. you're receiving these communications, doesn't mean you're insecure or unsafe. If you delete those messages in 99% of cases, what I recommend is people just flat out delete them, like you had mentioned. And that handles that specific instance. It's not going to stop that person or that company or whoever is doing that from continuing to send you additional things, but it's not going to, that communication that they had sent you is not going to turn into anything else. So you're safe for, the time being. The thing that's really important is just don't do what that email or text message or voicemail is asking you, and you are completely okay. Because also reporting them, it's not going to stop it in most cases, because frankly, when one group of social engineers gets shut down, they reform somewhere else around the world and restart doing things. Just the reality of cybersecurity today. And so what I recommend, really simple, just delete it and move on and recognize that you found it and feel good that you caught it, but just delete it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have questions for us? You can raise your hand. I can allow you to ask the question in person if you'd like. We'll keep moving along in the meantime, Connor. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I will stay right here on the screen for a few minutes. Victor asks, what is the cost of hiring a cyber expert?
Mm-hmm.
I will say this. It depends very widely. This, could be nothing. It could be more money than you have. That's the range we're working with here. It's going to depend largely upon two things. One, what are you hiring them to do? What do you want them to do? And two, what the actual situation is. So I'll give you an example. If somebody believes if you believe you've been hacked and you're asking an expert to come in and remediate the problem, the two things are going to be, what does that expert typically remediate? And then what is the actual situation when they get on site and try to remediate the cyber attack that you believe occurred? Hiring a cyber expert for advice is sometimes expensive as well. Getting free advice online, usually you get what you pay for. So free advice online is sometimes not the best. But it can range anywhere from free to very, very expensive, depending upon what you're asking them to do. Now, if you're also asking about, hiring a cybersecurity individual to work with your business, what I would recommend is, unless you have the resources to hire an entire team of cybersecurity experts and properly fund them and support them, I would hire what is called a managed service provider instead. So managed service provider is basically like, you usually contract somebody for all of your office supplies and your paper stuff. You'd be contracting a managed service provider for your cybersecurity and your IT infrastructure. They would make sure that your network's up and running and that you're secure in XYZ ways. And sometimes that can be inexpensive compared to other business costs, and sometimes that can be really expensive, depending upon what kind of protection you need.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Victor. Awesome.
Another question. Oh, I think that's the same one. I just didn't close it out. Okay.
Awesome. Well, I don't think we have any more questions, but I believe I have my contact information.
Great.
Yep. So if you want to reach out, connor@finsecurity.com. Here's our company's website. And then also connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to ask me some questions. Always happy to help in any way that I can.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. You gave us a lot to think about, and very, very good practical examples, which helps. As mentioned earlier, you will, everyone here will receive the recorded webinar following today's session, including those who registered and were not able to reach us. So just remember that SCORE is here to help you with the next steps on your business plans and challenges. Please reach out to your SCORE mentor for support on this topic or any of the other topics that are on your mind. You're not alone in this process of running your business. If you aren't already working with a SCORE mentor, you can easily request one by going to our website here, this link, and following the prompts that you see there, and also looking at and reading the profiles of each of our mentors. Or you can call the phone number that you see there and speak with Catherine Weisenberger.
Here.
She's our office administrator, and she will help match you with an appropriate mentor to help you. This information will also be included with the follow-up email and recording that SCORE will be sending you after the session today. This is just more contact information if you need it from us. But again, thank you so much, Connor. We really appreciate this education that you've given us today. I do see one question, and oh, it's actually a comment. Thanks, Connor. Great presentation. We will check to see about our registrations after the recording today. And that's a wrap for us. I appreciate your attendance and interest in this topic, and you all have a great day. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
All right. No problem.